Austin Davis had to step out. He had since we're running a little bit late, he had something he couldn't miss, so they asked me to step up. I'm excited about this panel. My own mining story was I almost burned down my house once with an Avalon ASIC 3 a long time ago. So you guys are—
You're an honorary member of this panel.
There you go. One quick second, I'm going to pull up my notes here. So you guys are all involved in mining in various ways. We have Open Carbon, Michael Turpin. We have Brittany Kaiser with Graphon, is that right? Griffin Mining, thank you. And Marshall Long with Rhodium, is that correct? And Jeremy, is it Nichelle? Yes. Jeremy Nichelle with Big Watt Digital. So thank you so much. We're going to be really tight on time because we're trying to bring it in. So what I want to start with is kind of the question that I get asked the most. This is a little bit selfish, but I imagine most people in the crowd have the same problem. Bitcoin mining is wasteful and terrible, and it just harms the economy. Or harms the environment. What's your best answer to that complaint?
I'm going to throw Brittany under the bus. Go ahead.
I mean, my best answer right now is that all of the data that we currently have shows that Bitcoin mining is greener than most other industries, and we're only starting to prove that. I've spent the past year and a half working with EnergyWeb, BlackRock, RMI, and a wider group of technical consultants on building out the sustainable Bitcoin standard, which will be launched very soon, where we have been putting a lot of the big miners through carbon emissions auditing and with the top firms in the world, and making sure that we have all of the data that we can open source, audit, track, and trace, and be able to verify from the ASIC plugged into energy level what energy is actually being used by the ASICs, as well as the entire carbon footprint, so we can look at how were the ASICs shipped to wherever they were plugged in, how are they being recycled, and the entire life cycle of the mining process. And the more data that we can produce, the more we can show to regulators that we are a responsible industry, that we are a green industry, and that we self-organize in a way that no other industry has. As soon as we started getting global responses that said that we were harming the environment, we self-organized in a way that I would say if all of the big tech companies decided to self-organize to be privacy-centric before the Cambridge Analytica Facebook scandal, which obviously never happened. But the Bitcoin mining industry has rallied together to become as green as possible, to invest in large-scale renewable development, and to start open sourcing data and becoming publicly audible in order to prove what we have been saying.
Well, there's a few things. I mean, first of all, I look at the person who asked that question and I say, do you think ATMs run on solar? I also remind them that gold mining, if they own any gold, is 10 times more energy intensive than Bitcoin mining. They say, oh, well, yes, but gold has a purpose. So does Bitcoin. And, you know, the other thing is that people don't understand that it's only the creation of Bitcoin, which is getting less and less every 4 years, that involves mining. Is a very tiny amount of the mining energy usage that actually is involved in the transactions, which go up all the time. And you know, it's the security to be able to protect a multi-trillion-dollar-a-year payment network, you know, for a fraction of the cost and energy usage. And so that's really, and the other thing is to look where this is coming from, right? So governments are terrified that crypto will become either part of or become the next reserve currency, so they have to attack it in multiple ways. Most of them they attack as securities. That's Gary Gensler's job, and I was really surprised to see Cynthia Lummis today say, well, now we know that after the merge that, she was normally a friend of the industry, Wyoming, you know her obviously. Did you see that she said that now we see that Ethereum is a security because of the merge? Cynthia Lummis. I know, it just came out a couple hours ago. And so
she's a maxi though.
Sorry?
She's a Bitcoin
Oh,
maxi.
that's true. But the point is that the problem is that if all the maxis say, okay, Ethereum is a security you can't own unless you're a accredited investor, and then they ban Bitcoin, as the ECB today, again, has been going after this, said, you know, we should really have any cryptocurrency, which is worthless anyway, and bad for you and speculative. We should also ban it in Europe because it's anti-environmental. So if you're going to ban Bitcoin for environmental reasons and ban everything else for securities reasons, it's like, okay, now you basically can just use our fiat print $1 trillion a day money.
Jeremy, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I echo everything that's being said on the panel. We took a strategy of going renewable because we didn't want the governance, we didn't want the pushback on regulation. And we also do believe in being as clean as possible. So I'm in more conversations in building out renewable energy being a Bitcoin miner than 10 times anything else I've ever done in my life. I think we're helping put more renewable energy on the grid through our efforts. And it's interesting, people don't realize there's pockets of energy that's trapped, that transmission lines can't necessarily get to where it needs to go, that is unused potential. It could be putting another generator in a dam, and it may take 2 years to build those transmission lines, but you can get extra revenue going to the municipalities, the state, that can finance those transmission lines and help them reinvest in more renewable energy. So.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you guys could also say, since you're helping fund schools, don't you care about the kids? That's an easy rebut for you. Yeah, to that point, there's a lot of stuff in Africa that is just to that point. It's all hydro, and it is helping people not do things like cook with kerosene and cook with paraffin and literally kill children due to fumes and all kinds of things. So there are a plethora of examples to point to now.
Fantastic. We're quick on time, so the main question I want to make sure all of you get a chance to answer is, what are you personally working on, and what is your company working on that you want this audience to know related to mining and sustainability? Like, what is the one thing that you're most proud of that you're putting in the world? I know, Marshall, you were talking about that idea where you wouldn't even need a grid, this idea that you can go in these fully local ideas for a local thing in Africa. I mean, what are the things you want this audience to know most as they come away from this?
Yeah, there are multiple ways that you can mine profitably, incentivize generation, and help a community all at the same time, and that's only possible through this mining mechanism in a sustainable way. And there are real examples right now that have real funding behind them. Gridless compute is a good example of that. Flare gas mining in Texas is a great example of that. There are real examples where it's a true win-win-win scenario, and this isn't just a one-sided conversation anymore.
So I think mining is just a great investment in general. I've invested 6 to 7 figures in this guy, this woman, and this lady rather, and this man, as well as DLTX. So, and I like the models that are sustainable because they also are the most cost efficient. And then open carbon, which you saw earlier, is nothing to do with mining, but it is NFT marketplace, B2B, for really being able to effectively buy and sell carbon to corporations. Sorry, for compliance with the Paris Agreement.
Yeah, I would say that actually is going to have an impact on the mining industry as well, as people are saying it's more and more expensive because of the open free carbon market to not do the dirty thing. They're going to start doing the clean thing more.
So at Griffin Digital Mining, we have been the leading technical advisor on the Sustainable Bitcoin Standard. If you guys haven't seen the Sustainable Bitcoin Standard or protocol, we're making huge announcements next month, but this is the first standard certificate in the industry that allows all miners to go through the process, to submit their data, to go through their audit, and if you get at least a minimum score to receive the certificate, then you now become a certified sustainable miner, and that opens up ESG mandated funds from some of the world's largest asset managers like BlackRock, so that they can actually start deploying money not just into Bitcoin as an asset class, but into Bitcoin miners and other companies that have Bitcoin as an essential asset class within the business model.
And maybe someday Lord Elon will let you go and buy a Tesla with if it's stamped green.
One day.
Instead of Dogecoin.
At Big Watt Digital, I'd say it's 3 quick things. One is in South Dakota, there's renewable energy providers that want to get on the grid. They can't get on the grid unless there's someone that takes the offtake, and there's not enough transmission lines to move the energy. We can take that offtake, and people can invest in the solar. 2 is flare gassing. it's really neat when you can sequester methane and would be stuck and actually create a wall of defensive support for a new financial currency. 3 is there's nations that their currency is crumbling and they would like some exports, and this is a way for them to mine their own exports without, polluting for gold mining in their country. And then the quick 4th is just the liquid-cooled immersion cuts down on e-waste, so we're using 40% less machines and more energy efficient in that manner.
Fantastic. I'm going through some of the notes that Austin sent me. I want to make sure some of his points get in here. And he talked about how the amount of solar energy hitting the Earth in 1 hour is more than enough to power the whole world for a year. But as you mentioned, the challenge is getting, okay, we can get energy here from the sun, but how do we get it to where the people need it? And so I think explaining that a little more is helpful. It took me a little while to get it. My friend Alana is doing a movie called Dirty Coin coming out next year or later. And the idea of that we can actually, as you said, make money from this energy and take that as a form of energy, currency being that energy, and spread it out there. Can you guys elaborate on that a little bit more? I think it's important to get. It took me a while to understand it. What does that look like to take that energy, whether it's solar or any renewable energy, tokenize it, and have it be an export, like you said?
That's something I've been very excited about for a time. I haven't actually looked into this in the last year. I've been just head down building, but I actually would love to hear some of your ideas around this, because I think there's a lot of protocol people on this panel as well, and I think that tokenizing items like this, where you don't have to plunder the resources, you can actually expend them while not dispersing with them, is critical to our financial economy. So I'll defer to some of the protocol folks here, though.
Oh, I definitely think that this is very much an open carbon question, but I think what me especially, I had our ESG committee as chair of the board, and when we're looking into offsets and the auditability and reliability of carbon credits that we can be purchasing from projects all around the world, we're only starting to see great solutions of being able to buy those on chain and being able to figure out where those carbon credits actually came from and the rating of the project. And I think it's really going to start empowering so many countries around the world to have their renewable projects be able to create carbon credits on chain and sell those reliably, auditably for companies that want to have that direct tracking and traceability. The carbon markets are becoming so much more sophisticated, and if as a company you're even trying to just offset something as little as corporate travel, because we run green mining companies, we're not using fossil fuels anyway, but we still have a carbon footprint as a company. So it's important for us to be able to empower projects around the world and be able to fund large-scale renewable project development, and also projects like reforestation or even management of old growth forests, and being able to fund those forests so that they're worth more alive than dead. And all of these types of projects are empowered by that carbon traceability and the tokenization for funding of those projects.
Yeah, and the biggest problem under the Kyoto Protocol and really at the early days of the Paris Agreement was fraud. Because you have this broken international system where it'll go through 4 or 5 hands, and the data changes a little bit if it goes through something that's not a blockchain. And there's just been massive fraud in terms of double creation of credits, double spending, and which obviously we know the white paper by Mr. Satoshi solved that problem, and double retirement, because at the end of the day, how you comply with the Paris Agreement is to actually retire it. Because you've taken a project, you've taken it off the market, you've sort of owned that project, and then you retire it so that then you have to now buy new projects that you have to fund. And that's something that's, sounds counterintuitive, but it's the way that, you have a choice of either, paying a fine, paying more taxes, paying higher interest rates, or funding these great projects. And there's also, I spent the whole week in New York during UN Climate Week, and was in a number of interesting presentations, including with a lot of world leaders who came out, and particularly from Africa and the Caribbean, and they were looking now at being able, because most of these countries are very carbon neutral, in fact negative. They're creators of these projects, and being able to go and saying, we want to go and trade all this carbon credits that we have as a nation and kind of broker these projects and trade that for lowering our IMF debt. And so that's very popular right now in the Caribbean.
Very cool. Very cool. Marshall, you have anything to add? So we've got about 5 minutes left. Yeah, do you guys want to do questions? We got questions. We got 5 minutes for Q&A.
Yeah, if somebody got a mic for the questions.
Go ahead, we can still hear you.
I can repeat the question if you just want to yell it out. I gotcha.
Yeah, we don't need 4 mics.
Thank you. Something that's always bothered me is the difference between offset against existing assets and remediation. How do you incentivize more remediation with tokenized assets?
Well, our platform is just dealing with offsets right now.
Yeah.
Marshall, you want to take that?
Yeah, so there are a few companies doing remediation. I think Stronghold is one that's kind of like their core business model, where they take coal refuse and scoop it up, and they're incentivized by the government to do that. As far as how you could do that with some kind of token, that's probably something where they have to partner with like a carbon exchange in order to do that effectively. But there are in the States a few programs in the Rust Belt, like in the PJM ISO area, that are actively doing that to mine Bitcoin and using a Bitcoin data center combined with a power plant in order to remediate, improve grid conditions and response time, and to make money. So there are places like that. So I haven't seen a confluence of those two things yet, but chop chop, Mike.
We got another 3.5 minutes. If you got another question, just go ahead and raise your hand. We'll get a mic to you really quick. So this is a great panel, experts that you wouldn't otherwise have a chance to chat with. So now's a great time to ask a question. While we're waiting for you to raise your hand, oh, there we got one. Go ahead, Brian.
What's your biggest challenge that you foresee for each of your individual efforts right now, or within the next year or so? What's the biggest challenge you foresee?
Elizabeth Warren.
Fair?
Fair.
If Donald Trump is elected, he'd try to pull us out of the Paris Agreement.
I would say disinformation campaigns and the amount of money that is put into trying to tar this entire industry with a brush that we completely don't deserve, and it has caused a lot of extra work on behalf of Bitcoin mining companies, where we have to really concentrate on lobbying, government relations, communications, and marketing for tackling an issue that we otherwise wouldn't have had.
Yeah, I would agree with disinformation campaigns, absolutely. I'd also add, for us, it's just being focused. There's so many great opportunities when markets are consolidated like this, of things to absorb, acquire, merge with, but to not get distracted by the small opportunities and to stick on a few big ones.
Excellent. Any other questions? Go ahead and raise your hand up. Go ahead.
I actually do have a question. So when it comes to renewable energy usage, for example, with hydroelectricity, how are you working around concerns of indigenous land rights, and even when it comes to water usage in regions, for example, in South Dakota, where a river feeds to other communities as well?
Yeah, in South Dakota, it's interesting. If you look at the amount of water that the farmers surrounding our land use, we're one of the best stewards of water of any residents on the land. So I think for the amount of water we're consuming, we're in good shape. We're very careful to select a particular type of cooling unit that is very efficient in its water usage. So we have way more water than we could possibly use, and we use way less compared to farming. So as far as the best use for the land, for the water, I think we're actually a good candidate for that, especially when you combine with the amount of jobs and the amount of revenue we make per liter of water we use for the state is actually quite impressive. Of that, I'll just keep it short of that.
All right, we got under a minute, so last question really quick from each one of you. What percentage of mining power do you think will be fully sustainable in the next 5 years? 5 years from now, what percentage is going to be sustainable in mining? Just go down the list, give your best guess.
85%.
Nice.
I'm not going to argue with Marshall, 85%.
We shouldn't have had Marshall
Yeah,
go first.
I definitely would say at least 75% or above, because right now a lot of the data is showing us that we're already at least 50%, and it will take us many years to build to another 25% or more. But I really think we can become majority if we're not already very quickly, and have the data to prove that.
Yep, 75 to 85, and I think it was nice to see the carbon emission from China shut off. We all saw break that 50% mark, have a little celebration, get Bitcoin back accepted with Tesla, and we're back on our way.
Fantastic. Thank you guys so much. I'd love to end on that high note. Let's get a round of applause.